Almost every musical that's been adapted from a stage play is a version of the stage play, and it's just in front of a camera. And the nice thing about Sweeney Todd is that Tim Burton is transforming a stage piece into a movie. It's a real movie. I think it's the first time it's really been done.
Turning beauty into filth and greed, I too have sailed the world and seen its wonders. For the cruelty of men is as wondrous as Peru, but there's no place like London.
In 1973, I was in London for Gypsy, and I saw this play, Sweeney Todd, advertised at Stratford East, which is a working man's theater, say it's a pub and theater combined, out about half an hour outside of the central part of London. I'd heard it was Grand Guignol, and I'd never seen Grand Guignol, and I wanted to. And I got out there, and it wasn't Grand Guignol at all. It was this play which had between its scenes songs that the audience would join in singing. They would bring their beer in from the pub next door. So it was very jolly, but the play was kind of creepy and charming. And it was Sweeney Todd, and the next day, I thought, matter of fact, that evening, I thought, make a musical. And the next day, I went to the British Library to pick up the script and found out that there had been 3 or 4 scripts. It was invented in the 1840s as what they call a penny dreadful, the kind of thing that Dickens did, where each week for a penny you'd get the next installment of the story. And then a guy named George Dibdin Pitt, who was sort of the most popular playwright of his day, made it into a play in the late 1840s. It became a big hit, and then different people did different versions of it over the century. And then in the 20th century, in fact, in the early 1970s, Chris Bond wrote his own version, and he inserted into this story elements of the Count of Monte Cristo and of the Revengers tragedy, so that for the very first time, Sweeney was motivated instead of just being a kind of villain, which he had been for 100 years. And that's the version I saw, and that just struck me that it would make a good musical. And I thought it would really be fun to scare an audience and see if you could do it while people are singing. So the creative process merely was to take the story and just go through it. The script is actually not very long, Bond's script. It's a very compact piece. And I began to write both the book and the songs myself. And I got up to page 7, and already the script, my version was already 45 minutes long, and there were like 35 pages in the script. So I thought, I've got to get somebody to hold me down and keep it compressed. So I asked a fellow who I knew very well named Hugh Wheeler, with whom I'd done a show called A Little Night Music. And he was British, and he knew the tale of Sweeney Todd. Nobody in this country had ever heard of it before. He also had written murder mysteries under a pseudonym for most of his career. So he was the perfect collaborator. And so we started work on it.
For me, I think Sweeney Todd's the best thing he's ever written, because it's, as I say, it's beautiful. The songs are just, they're complete.
He really did redefine what musical theater was in the 20th century. Went from being, in the tradition of Rodgers and Hammerstein, these much more external stories, to like the evocation of like intense emotional, conditions for these characters, and the modernity of the music and the modernity of the approach to it. It's just, he literally reinvented the genre. So there is no Sweeney Todd without Stephen Sondheim.
All right, you, sir, how about a show? Come and visit your good friend Sweeney. You, sir, too, sir, welcome to the grave. I will have vengeance. I will have salvation.
What I like best about Sweeney is it's the story. And I love watching an audience in a theater, particularly in the second act, when things really start to pile up, and they don't know whether the people on stage are singing or talking, because they're so enwrapped in the story. And that's what I like best about it, is the suspense and drama that's created between the tension of the actual story and the tension of what's going on in the orchestra.
It turns out that of all of his plays, The ones that are most performed are West Side Story and Sweeney Todd. And I asked why was that? He said, you know, with typical humility, it's because they have the best stories. And you think about it, there is a basic and essential and strong narrative, a drive to Sweeney Todd, which is really kind of unique in musicals. It would work very well without the music, which says a lot about that story.
Well, one of the reasons music is so continuous in it is to keep the audience in suspense. I mean, when you see something as over the top as this plot, if you're going to prevent the audience from giggling in the wrong way, they should laugh out of nervous tension. But then the way you hold it together is to keep music going all the time. If they're not singing, then there's music underscoring. There are very few moments of silence from the orchestra pit in the show. I'd say the show is probably about 80% sung, 20% talked, but even the talk, about half of that is underscored. And it's the way to keep the audience in a state of tension, because if they ever get out of the fantasy, they're looking at, you know, a ridiculous story with a lot of stage blood.
And are you beautiful and pale with yellow hair? I want you beautiful and pale the way I've dreamed you were.
The violence is secondary to the motive. That's what Christopher Bond did. It's a story about revenge, and it's about how revenge eats itself up. And it's, in that sense, it's a tragedy. And it's in classic tradition of somebody who goes out for revenge and ends up destroying himself. And that's exactly what happens in the case of Sweeney Todd. It's the danger, it's the pleasures and the dangers of revenge. And I am somebody who believes that revenge is part of human nature, that we all have it.
My lord, and who may it be said is your intended sir?
My ward. Pretty as a rosebud.
Pretty as a mother.
What? What was that?
Nothing, sir. Nothing. May we proceed?
Tim Burton actually had come to me about 20 years ago. He was a big fan of the piece. He'd seen it in London. It was not a success in London the first go-round. It has been since, but the very first time it was done in London, they didn't like it. And yet he saw 12 performances, I believe, and we only ran for like 3 months, so he saw a lot of performances. And he came to me many years ago, I think it was about 20 years ago, and said he wanted to do the movie. I said, great, and then I never heard from him again. So when he resurfaced, I said, great, and this time he did it.
I think, you know, he's the living master of the American musical theater. This is his masterpiece. It's his most important work, and we could not have done it without working closely and without feeling that he blessed all of the decisions made. And he was remarkably collaborative and open to ways to make it not just a stage musical, but a movie, and I think delighted in the process of reinventing it. Could not have been a better collaborator.
On the heart leap higher, what more?
What more
Can man require than love, sir?
More than love, sir.
What's her?
Women.
Yes, women.
Pretty women.
We have nothing but respect for the original musical of Sweeney Todd, but Stephen Sondheim himself would be the last person to want it to be a bland recounting of the entire score. So we had to cut certain songs. We decided to truncate songs, to take out verses of particular songs, as well as to expand certain areas. Always trying to keep one thing focused, which is, in the stage show, there's a plethora of characters and plot strands that weave in and out in true theatrical melodramatic form. In the movie, we wanted to keep it very tightly focused on the journey of Sweeney Todd. So we always kept Sweeney Todd, if you will, in the center of the frame. So other subservient elements, other secondary or tertiary elements gradually fell away so we could focus very tightly on that man's journey.
It was always a concern, and we never wanted to push the boundary or anything, but my dealings with Stephen he's been so receptive. Even when we were recording the music, he would sit in the recording studio and make very few comments, let Tim do what he wanted to do, and it was only if it ever got completely different that he'd probably say, well, you know what, can we just keep that way or whatever, but he's been very open and letting us remove melodies so we could just have underscore, which has been fantastic, because underneath a lot of his melodies, he said it himself, it's very Bernard Herrmann. and it feels like a film score.
Business needs a lift, debts to be erased. Think of it as thrift, as a gift, if you get my drift.
What the fans of the stage music are going to find is a lot of cuts, both within the songs and songs that have been cut. And I'm going to try to urge them as much as possible to leave their memory of the stage show outside the door because, as I say, unlike all other movies of musicals that I know, this really is movies of stage musicals. This really is an attempt to take the material of the stage musical and completely transform it into a movie. This is not a movie of the stage show. This is a movie based on a stage show.
Listen to me, please. You know there's nothing I wouldn't do for you. Say, if there was someone around, someone bad, only you didn't know it.
What I'm excited about what I'm curious about is how an audience will respond to people who, how speech goes into song and song goes into speech, and see whether it bothers them or not, or whether it enhances what's being said and sung. Again, that's a convention that everybody accepts in musical theater, but they're not exposed to it very often in musical movies because musical movies are about songs, not about sung speech.